And that, my friends, is how America was made great once again. Breaking at this hour, Jimmy Sengenberger is currently at the crossroads of politics and economics. Radio broadcaster master, now the celeb on the web. He's the smarty of the party. He's in cahoots with the grassroots. Jimmy at the Crossroads brings you thought-provoking commentary, hard-hitting interviews, original satire, and the best bumper music known to man. Jimmy at the Crossroads!
Gonna talk money, gonna talk politics, great for all generations. Oh, what a great mix, I said. Gonna talk money, gonna talk politics, great for all generations. Oh, what a great mix. I got Jimmy at the Crossroads, making sense out of nonsense. People want answers, they want to understand. They come to the crossroads and Jimmy gives them the plan. I said, gonna talk money, gonna talk politics, great for all generations. Oh, what a great mix. I got Jimmy at the crossroads, making sense out of nonsense. Come on, Jimmy, what you got?
Hello, my friends, and welcome to another edition of Jimmy at the Crossroads. I'm Jimmy Sengenberger, your host for the program, coming to you in partnership with the Washington Examiner. So great to be with you. Thanks for joining us as we do our level best to make sense out of nonsense and bring engaging, intelligent talk, Sang style. Got a great show. Today, I'm looking forward to talking with Howard Husock, who has a great piece that came out last week online and is in the latest issue of the Washington Examiner magazine. You could subscribe, by the way, at WashingtonExaminer.com. It's entitled Living in the Future, and it's a fascinating read. Howard is a senior fellow at the Manhattan Institute, and his insights on going forward after this pandemic and living in the future and things we will have to keep in mind, how things may change and what have you, is very fascinating, to be sure. Looking forward to diving into it with Howard. We will also talk with our producer extraordinaire, Matoush Magic, Nathan Matoush, a little bit about what's happening in the sports world. It's interesting here, especially the economic aspects of it all. And then Heidi Ganahl, board chair for Job Creators Network, will join us to talk about the latest news on the Paycheck Protection Program. But first, yesterday, I blasted MSNBC for comments by David Zirin and Philip Rucker, and it just really, you just go down the line, that were absolutely despicable. They truly were despicable in saying that the protesters and rally goers across the country here in Denver, Colorado, where we're broadcasting from and elsewhere, insinuating or literally stating that they are racist, that they are Nazi Confederates, and the list goes on. Well, MSNBC is not the only source of mudslinging slime against Americans who, let's be honest, they're frustrated because their lives have been uprooted and their livelihoods are suffering now. And their lives are suffering now because of these government policies that we're told will just, by some, we're told we'll just have to keep going until the government decides in its infinite wisdom that we peons can live our lives as we want once again. Now, understandably, there will be policies in place, and this takes time and so forth. But even so, the idea that we should just sit down and shut up and just take whatever the government tells us, that's not what we should be sitting for, and not what the media should be spewing day in and day out. Now, let's go to CNN, where Don Lemon, who, the guy is self-righteous to the core. And let's play this clip of Don Lemon last night he had an exchange with Chris Cuomo, and he went off on rally-goers and protesters saying, hey, we need to start reopening America.
Every night when I leave this studio and when I come in, there's an army of people. When I go through New York City, an army of immigrants and people of color and poor people who are keeping this city running. They are disinfecting offices. They are cleaning people. They are changing bedpans. And they are working. And those people are out there complaining because they don't have haircuts? Who the hell do you think you are? And if you're so upset about it, you should be mad at the president because he's the one that's supposed to help your small businesses. I understand that you're hurting. I understand that people are hurting. Yes, a lot of people are hurting. But there are people who are frontline workers who have to get out there. I did the color of COVID this weekend. Those people are at the grocery stores who didn't expect to have their lives be placed in danger because they have to work at the grocery store. They're driving buses, and you're protesting against. You're slapping the faces of the people who are the healthcare workers who put their lives on the line every day because you want a haircut, you want to go play golf. You're concerned about. Of course, you're concerned about your business. Tell the president that. And you're out there with okay,
all right,
with guns?
Matoush, that's enough. That's all I can handle from Don Lemon. Just real briefly, because we're tight on time in this segment. The idea that you have Don Lemon, who, look, he's able to go into work in his studio, good for him. I am too, good for me. He's able to continue his job talking down to average Americans. Don Lemon gets to do that, just fine for him. But he doesn't want other Americans doing so. He says it's a slap in the face to healthcare workers and grocery store workers. No, it isn't. Not one way, in no way whatsoever is calling for a reopening process to begin a slap in the face of healthcare workers or grocery workers. There are other people who want to go out and work too, and who are willing to take precautions and who understand that things are not going to be perfectly normal. Who the hell do you think you are, Don Lemon says, to these Americans who have been uprooted? Well, who the hell does Don Lemon think he is? Telling Americans what they can be frustrated about or can't be frustrated about. They can't just look to Trump to help small businesses because we don't believe that the federal government can actually step in and do the role of being the nanny for the American people for weeks or months on end. The American people do not believe that and should not believe that, certainly not these protesters and rally-goers. Moreover, it's not just the president, it's Congress, which dithered for a long time, for days and days, to get this Paycheck Protection Program expanded a little bit because the Democrats were holding it up. I mean, gosh, this is sort of that consistent self-righteous attitude I noticed from Don Lemon and many others among the left and the media who sneer at average Americans who are expressing their frustrations. But hey, they're making conclusions about why those Americans they just want a haircut. They don't just want a haircut. Come on. All right, we're out of time here. We got to take a break. When we come back, we'll talk with Howard Husock of the Manhattan Institute about his piece for the Washington Examiner. Keep it right here. Jimmy at the Crossroads, just getting started in partnership with the Washington Examiner. I'm Jimmy Sengenberger.
We interrupt this program for a very important presidential message.
I have an issue that's very important right now to the American people and to the people of the United States as well. Our jobs are disappearing to Mexico. I'm going to change that in 2021 when I'm reelected. These jobs are gone. Even the Keebler Cookie Company is no longer, it's in Mexico, folks. It's down in Mexico so far. And those elves are out of a job. Our elves are out of, they don't even speak Spanish. They can't go down there, and they have Mexican elves down there now who don't even understand English making these cookies. I'm going to read the new ingredients just so you're interested. Honey, check. Wheat, check. Oats, check. Sugar, of course. But here's where it gets strange. Chicharrones. What's chicharrones? Jalapeno peppers, folks. If you try these cookies, you're going to burn your tongue off. It'll be gone. You'll have nothing. You won't be able to speak Spanish or English or any other language. I'm going to bring those elves back so quick and so much. They're going to love it. You're going to have your cookies back, and your tongue's going to be fine, believe me. Trump 2020, thank you very much.
So these are the auditions for guest host of my new show, Jimmy at the Crossroads. Please step up and state your name.
Hi, I'm Dr. Phil. You know, every pancake has two sides, and we're going to get to the other side of that pancake when we come back from the break.
Mr. Shatner.
Bernie Sanders will probably be the Democratic nominee.
You're going to have to talk faster.
I was going at full speed.
Kelsey Grammer.
Very well. I'll send you all to heaven before condemning you to hell. My little snowy flake, poor little snowy flake, triggered in every way.
President Bill Clinton, whenever you're ready.
Hey, how y'all doing? So, how about we play a little game of the old switcheroo?
Thank you.
Hey, if I get the gig, do I get an intern?
Thank you.
Just asking.
Tom Hanks, go ahead, please.
I am Tom Hanks at your service.
Can you try an announcer voice, sir?
Oh, an announcer voice. Oh, come on. I got a lot of movies to do. Okay, I'll do an announcer voice. I am an announcer. I'm the announcer. Ha! How was that? The announcer guy. Ha!
I think we're going to have to do another audition call, guys.
America's politics are crazy. The culture is in flux. That's why we work hard to help you keep up.
More politics, more culture, and more access.
We focus on the biggest stories of the day with some of the biggest names in politics and punditry.
Go to our website, WashingtonExaminer.com. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, let's send it to Sang Style. Jimmy Sengenberger, episode 28 of The Crossroads.
Welcome back to Jimmy at the Crossroads, coming to you in partnership with the Washington Examiner, bringing you engaging, intelligent talk, Sang Style. Thanks so much for joining us. Being a part of the program, pleasure and a privilege to be with you as always. Be sure, if you have not done so already, to subscribe to the show on the YouTube channel, Jimmy at the Crossroads, youtube.com/Jimmy at the Crossroads. And I have to tell you that it is always such a treat to be here on this program and be able to delve in to substantive issues of the day. And especially when we're able to talk with writers and reporters at our partners at the Washington Examiner, including those who provide good content, who may not be mainstays at the Examiner, but are mainstays at other institutions that provide very thoughtful discussion on key issues of the day. So the Washington Examiner has a regular magazine, WashingtonExaminer.com, by the way, where you can go to subscribe. And there's a great new piece for the magazine for the latest issue entitled Living in the Future. The author is Howard Husock, and he is a senior fellow at the Manhattan Institute. And this really talks about some of the ways in which society may need to adjust and has been adjusting over time, really, to accommodate population changes and issues and questions of disease, viruses, and more. The author of Living in the Future piece for the Washington Examiner magazine, Howard Husock, joins us now on Jimmy at the Crossroads. Howard, sir, welcome to the show. It is good to have you.
Great to be here, Jimmy. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. I appreciate you taking the time today to join us. So let's just jump right into a very basic question, which is, What made you want to address the question of living in the future and especially focus on issues like housing policy?
I've written for a long time on housing policy, so it's an interest of mine. And I was engaged by the idea of, well, how is this going to just change everything? Our living pattern is going to change. When you see a disease, and disease has always been the downside of cities. Cities are great. I love cities. Cities are where civilization occurs. But it's also true that cities have long been associated with disease outbreaks. And now that that has reared its head again, I was curious as to contemplate the idea of how that was going to put into motion the living patterns and preferences of Americans.
Now, one of the things that you start off doing is really talking a little bit about the history of housing in the United States and the changing patterns where we went from being more city life-like and onto moving into suburbs and spreading out a little bit more, and then now back to a more urbanized type of situation in many respects. Chart us through a little bit of the history of the United States when it comes to housing arrangements.
Well, of course, before the Civil War, most of America lived on the farm, 90%. And with industrialization, cities emerged and changed our living patterns dramatically. So if you go to New York in the 1890s, suddenly you had the advent of tenement districts, of tuberculosis spreading in those districts, of concern on the part of reformers. How do we deal with this? And this density was very useful financially in all sorts of ways, but it also scared people because it was true that disease spread in highly dense areas. And over the course of the 20th century, until pretty recently, you could see American living patterns as a gradual move away from density. First, we went to places that you could reach on the streetcar, and then after World War II, car commuting, suburbanization, and larger and larger lots, not just suburbanization. The original Levittown lots, the first big post-war suburb, they were pretty small. But then over time, you started to have 1 and 2 acre zoning, and so we were in a retreat from density. But then, as the whole collective memory of cities as associated with illness and the health concerns faded from our memory, we had a back to the cities movement. And certainly we've seen New York regain all the population that it lost. So it's back to well over 8 million and was moving toward 9. We've seen density in the Bay Area the same way. So we had moved back toward density, and now we're rolling the dice again.
I've noticed something, Howard Husock, again, our guest, senior fellow at the Manhattan Institute and author of the piece for the Washington Examiner magazine, Living in the Future. I noticed that when we see this crisis unfold, and as we've seen it unfold over the last couple of months especially, that the hot spots, as they've been called, for the spread of coronavirus, COVID-19, has more so been in these urban areas. And it's interesting to see that given where we are now here in the 21st century, in the year 2020, when even centuries ago people understood that viruses spread in these more urbanized centers where you have a lot of people that are collected together. What do you think that the nature of our society has become as far as the housing makeup and sort of a return to where things have been in the past, despite the lessons we've learned about things like the spread of virus and disease?
Well, we had such medical successes that we became complacent about these things. I think that's the only way to put it. But let's keep in mind, as the great economist Ed Glaeser has written at Harvard, the triumph of the city. Cities are great centers of innovation and trade. And so we don't want to denigrate cities. It's unfortunate what happens when they become centers of disease. And we would rather them not be centers of disease. So when we had the advent of great antibiotics and great vaccines for viruses, polio was a virus. and we vaccinated against it. So it's hard to blame ourselves for being complacent about those things, because the advantages of cities are so great that we would hope to put those kind of health concerns behind us. And it's tragic, unfortunate, that this pandemic has now come back to bite us.
How does infrastructure in a city area, as well as the cost of housing, impact where people decide that they want to live vis-a-vis city versus outside the city?
Well, Jimmy, I think that's one thing that we really could see change, and change quickly because of this crisis. We've seen a few metropolitan areas become really the most economically advantageous places to live. New York, Boston, the Bay Area, tech centers, finance centers, and places where the cost of housing has just skyrocketed out of all proportion to what it is in other parts of the country. I have a good friend in Cleveland Heights, Ohio, who told me about some tech guys from San Francisco who moved across the street from him, and they bought a house for a fifth of what it would have cost them to buy in the Bay Area, and as he puts it, they're living large. And so one thing that people are discovering now is that working from home is really a thing. It really might work. And working from home doesn't mean that your home has to be geographically contiguous to the office that you're reporting to. And so the huge, not only the increase in the number of people working from home, but their comfort level, both the comfort level of the employees and the employers with that, could really change preferences. And so just think about, you talked about infrastructure. There are a lot of cities in this country that have lost population, which have terrific infrastructure. They've got the utilities, they've got the older homes that are underpriced, and they will become, I think, potential magnets for people to discover. Already in the Wall Street Journal this morning, we read about a service. She calls herself Suburban Jungle, helping people move out of the city as rapidly as possible, in contrast to Urban Jungle. It's a pretty good joke. And people are moving from New York to Rochester, a place that had lost population for decades. It's got solid, inexpensive housing. I think we could easily see that trend develop on a large scale, and we may see a repopulation of cities that we had written off.
Again, we're talking with Howard Husock, who is a senior fellow at the Manhattan Institute and author of the piece for the Washington Examiner magazine, Living in the Future. The point that you just mentioned about working from home, the one piece of infrastructure that really needs to be bolstered, I think, in many parts of the country is broadband. And there's discussion more of expanding 5G internet service as well, or wireless service. Because if you are going to be able to work from home, you need to have high-speed internet access and good phone connections, because otherwise it's not as easy to make it function well.
Well, I agree with that, and I know that the Secretary Mnuchin yesterday mentioned broadband as something that might be part of a infrastructure stimulus plan. It makes really good sense, and it may not make financial sense for Verizon, AT&T, and the others to build this out into rural areas. I don't know that industry well enough to say that definitively, but if it doesn't, then maybe we do have something akin to the rural electrification project that happened in the New Deal. And that's the kind of investment that pays off, because people can live in less expensive places and enjoy the quality of life that they might not otherwise be able to.
I think I've observed some others, and I agree with this, making the point as well that the FCC and its rules on net neutrality and loosening of those regulations have made broadband use easier for Americans as compared to those in Western Europe. because Western Europeans have slower internet as a result of more restrictive internet regulations, whereas here in the United States we opened up a little bit more with net neutrality. So I found that to be an interesting point that dovetails in with the broadband discussion as well, Howard. So looking out into the future, I mean, we're already talking about this as far as working from home and so forth. When policymakers are looking at housing policy and any of these infrastructure projects in other areas, what do you think they need to keep in mind locally, state-wise, and also at the federal level to adjust to the lessons that we're learning as a result of the coronavirus crisis?
I think that public officials in places that are may start to see an increase in emigration from some of the hot tech hubs like the Bay Area, New York, have to keep in mind that they have to find ways to accommodate a range of income groups that might be coming. And so in a lot of places, that may not be that difficult. There may be older, lower priced housing that not only those of means can afford to buy, but those who would be part of the service industries that would be drawn to help those of means could also afford. But there are also cities which don't have very much what people like to call affordable housing. And I think that we need to resist the idea that the only way that we can provide such housing is to subsidize it. This has become a mantra of progressives really since the New Deal, that the private market can't provide lower cost housing. Only government can do that either itself through public housing or through subsidized housing. But historically, small neighborhoods, what you might call the poor side of town, is an option. And what that means is we have to be able to, on a case-by-case basis at the local level, relax some of our zoning. That makes it impossible to build small houses on small lots. We're not talking about high-rise apartment buildings in Boise, Idaho, but small houses on small lots need the zoning that permits it, and that can be the housing for emergency medical technicians, for teachers, for firefighters, for the working class.
I think that's such an important point, and it's an example of government getting in the way of a common sense housing opportunities for more people. That is to be able to access affordable housing, good quality housing, because the government feels that it knows best when it comes to zoning requirements, which put serious limitations that, as we're seeing now, can have potentially dire consequences, as opposed to the idea that government swooping in will make everything better.
Well, it's, we have a federalist system, and all of these planning decisions about what kind of housing and what kind of zoning we have are made at the local level. So we're not going to get very far attacking these local officials because they're strangling the market, even though they are. Somehow we have to convince them that it's in their locality's interest to relax this kind of zoning stranglehold that they've imposed. And I think the best arguments is focus not on how do we help the very poorest move to your community, but how do we help the working class that you need move to your community. The teachers, the firefighters, the EMTs, and the public safety workers, the nurses, they need places to live near your local hospital. And if you're going to price them out through zoning, it's not good for you, because politics is driven by self-interest.
Great point again. Howard Husock is our guest, author of the piece for the Washington Examiner magazine, which you could find online at WashingtonExaminer.com, entitled Living in the Future. Let's talk about transportation for a moment, Howard, because this is one issue people across the country have just been dealing with. I mean, we see roads. They are constantly clogged up, increasingly so. I'm here in Denver, Colorado, where I've noticed our roads have been filled up more and more in recent years, particularly as more people have been traveling here to Colorado and moving to the state. And you say this in your piece, again, Living in the Future. One can imagine that new transportation developments, such as the small Uber-like on-demand buses that are supplanting failing public bus systems in some places, will help help employees get to jobs both near and far. Expand a little bit for us on how you view transportation as potentially unfolding and how we might be able to help facilitate that transition.
Well, we've seen transportation as kind of a binary choice, as the economists like to say. Either you drive by yourself in your private car, or you try to get on a public bus which doesn't show up, and the systems for which are very costly for localities and regions. But why shouldn't we think about the revolution in app-based transportation applying to mass transit as well? One of the reasons people don't want to take the bus because it doesn't stop near their house and it doesn't take them where they want to go. So those are both pretty big problems. But if you could schedule an on-demand, there's a service called Via. I'm not making these things up. Uber-like buses exist already, and some municipalities are using them to help people get to train stations and other economic hubs in their communities. If you could use an app to get a bus to pick you up at your house, pick up 20 other people, maybe only 10 now because of social distancing, but we'll see how that goes, to take all of you basically to the same street corner where you want to go, that is so much better than a fixed route public bus or fixed route rail service, which so many municipalities still think is the only alternative, but is very, very costly.
Well put. As we wrap up with you, Howard Husock, let's talk for a moment about the bottom line here for the future and what policymakers ought to keep in mind. And I think my takeaway from your piece, Living in the Future, for the Washington Examiner magazine, as well as our conversation here, is we need to unleash private sector innovation from government restrictions. And if we can do that, that will help to foster the kinds of transitions we need as a society to adjust to these dynamics we're currently facing with coronavirus, but also be able to really be creative in addressing future problems and challenges that we don't know about yet.
Well, we do need a well-functioning government. That's
of course. I'm not disputing that either. Yeah.
And there are certain core functions of governments, such as public health and public safety, that we want to be better. So we should we have to bracket that. But, we're already seeing the private sector innovation which has occurred as being absolutely crucial to our getting through this virus. Again, going back to working from home, well, that's only possible because of what's happened over the last 20 years. If this virus had hit us 20 years ago, we would have been adrift.
Right.
Our employment would have been even so much worse. So we're already capitalizing on private sector innovation. And by the way, I know Bernie Sanders would demonize Big Pharma as a bunch of greedy overlords, but now we're looking to them for treatments and vaccines. And so we do want to unleash those private sector forces in conjunction with a government that works.
Well said. I couldn't agree more with all that you put right there, Howard Husock. Well said, my friend. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us here today on Jimmy at the Crossroads. I really appreciate it, and I strongly encourage everybody to check out your piece for the Washington Examiner magazine at washingtonexaminer.com, Living in the Future.
Thanks so much, Jimmy, for having me.
Thank you for joining us. Really appreciate the time. Once again, Howard Husock joining us, author of Living in the Future for the Washington Examiner. Such a great treat to have him on. Insightful, thoughtful conversations is what we need to have about moving forward. And fundamentally, in my view, the lesson here is, as we talked about at the end there, the lesson is that government gets in the way so often. Yes, there are services that it needs to provide, but all too often, government gets in the way of unleashing private sector innovation, which is necessary to address these challenges that our country faces, from coronavirus onto a variety of topics. So fascinating conversation, and I appreciate Howard Husock joining us. And by the way, again, be sure to subscribe to the Washington Examiner magazine. They're our friends and partners here on Jimmy at the Crossroads, and very excited to be able to work with them. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we will be joined by none other than our producer extraordinaire, Nathan Matoush, talk a little bit about sports. There's actually sports news this week, which is pretty interesting. We're finally getting some of it, as well as some of the economics of it, the prospect for people coming back to sports games? How likely is it that sooner than later people will be in the stands again? We'll talk a little bit about that with Nathan. And then coming up, Heidi Ganahl is board chair for the Job Creators Network, and she's going to join us to talk a little bit about the Paycheck Protection Program, where things are at with that, how small businesses are doing, and more. So keep it right here. Lots more coming up on Jimmy at the Crossroads in partnership with the Washington Examiner. I am Jimmy Sengenberger. Stay with us.
Concerned about that trade deficit? Looking for that magic solution? I'm Bill of Goods for ScamWow, the tariff towel. It's like a tax. It's like a fee. It's like a penalty. This tariff really sucks up the trade deficit. And the jobs we'll save are tremendous. This is for the House, the Senate, the POTUS. You'll be saying crap every time you use the ScamWow tariff towel. Look at this. It just does the work. Why wouldn't you want to pay twice the price for that washing machine? How much would you pay for this tariff? It'll make this microwave seem like it's brand new. And at only twice the price. Look at the way the tariff towel cleans your clock. Wow, look at that. So clean, you can see the future. You can see future tariffs coming from a mile away. Look at the way it polishes these stars. Boy, if that don't make you feel patriotic, huh?
I love paying extra. I don't even worry about it anymore, since the trade deficit will go down.
Look at this tariff. I love this tariff. It's like a security blanket.
All I can say is, scam, wow!
ScamWow compels other nations to use their own tariff towels on our stuff, making our goods more expensive overseas. Whoopee.
The micro tariff is for everything, for lumber, for steel, even solar panels. It'll melt that trade deficit down. I don't know. It sells itself, America. The ScamWow sells for 25%. But if you call in the next 20 minutes, because we can't do this all term, we'll give you the second tariff absolutely free. That's 4 tariffs for 25%. And it comes with a 5-year warranty. Here's how to order.
Call 1-800-RIP-YOU-OFF. ScamWow is not available in capitalism and is made in Washington. Beware of ScamWow grift. 1-800-RIP-YOU-OFF. Call now.
Hi, Tom. Gee, you look terrible.
I feel terrible. Achy, fevery, nauseous.
Ooh, that's too bad. You know, you ought to...
Chills, stuffiness, bloating.
Yeah, you know...
Scratchy, gassy, drippy.
I know. Say, Tom, you should try Wearaflu.
Wearaflu?
Wearaflu is the only medication that actually takes your flu symptoms and hides them at various places inside your body, so that by the time your body finds them all, your flu is gone. In the meantime, you're back to work.
You were right, Ed. Wearaflu lets me ignore my flu symptoms and gets me back to work. Thanks.
Yeah, and thanks for coming in and infecting the rest of the office.
Come out wherever you are with Wearaflu. Take as directed.
And now, the further future adventures of Starship Winkler. In today's episode, the captain is making travel plans.
Sparks, open up a frequency to price expediosity line.
Yes, Captain.
Hello, and welcome to Price Expediosity Line. How can I help you?
Well, I'll need a room.
Are you traveling alone?
Yes.
Oh, that's a shame. Never found the right woman, huh?
Well, there was this... No, wait, just book me a bed.
King, queen, full, twin, Murphy, or bunk.
King. You never know.
Well, as long as you're convinced. All right, name your price.
Name my price?
That's how it works. Name your price.
$6?
$6 it is. Let's plug it in here. Bippity boppity boo. And sorry, you were outbid.
By how much?
Penny. Someone bid 6. Oh, 1.
Who?
Oh boy, I just booked a room for $6.01.
Well, will the captain ever make a good bed bid? Tune in next time when we hear...
Here's one for $602.
I'll take it.
$1,000.
No! Damn dramatic pauses.
On Starship Winkler.
Do you wear a toupee? Do you yell out, Spark? Do you put in pauses when you talk? Do you start real soft and then go real loud? Have you won 2 Emmys? Do you love a crowd?
Whatever makes you feel like a Shatner. Yeah, you got lots of macho and swagger. You had alien affairs. You sing bad but no one cares. You find low airline fares. If you like to work, got a handsome smirk. If you're Captain Kirk, whatever makes you feel like a
Me. Phasers on stunning. Whatever makes you feel like a Shatner.
Whatever makes you feel like a Shatner.
Whatever makes you feel like a
Welcome back. That never gets old. Welcome back to Jimmy at the Crossroads. I'm Jimmy Sengenberger, your host for the program, coming to you in partnership with the Washington Examiner, bringing engaging, intelligent talk, Sang style. In just a little bit, we will be joined by the board chair for Job Creators Network, Heidi Ganahl, to talk about the Paycheck Protection Program, small businesses, and the coronavirus, and more. Looking forward to that conversation. But right now, you know him. You love him. He's our producer extraordinaire, Nathan Matoush, working the Matoush magic day in and day out, and he joins me now. It's been a little while since we brought him on. I thought, hey, we've got the draft coming up tomorrow, football draft for the NFL, and some other sports news that's been going on. There's talk still about reopening sports sooner than later, so it's about time we brought on Nathan Matoush. Mr. Matoush, how you doing, sir?
Doing good, Jimmy. How you doing today?
You know, it's going all right. I'm doing well, and I'm just loving that we're in Denver, Colorado, and it is beautiful outside. Another beautiful day in Colorado, and maybe, just maybe, this state will be opening up pretty soon. But let me ask you this question, Nathan, which is, you got the draft coming up tomorrow. Just a basic question. Are you excited? Are you glad to finally have some sort of a sports event happening?
Yeah, no, I think I'm super excited for the draft, and it's usually during this time I'm kind of watching the Stanley Cup playoffs right now, you know, the NBA playoffs, and, you know, I'm into the draft, but I don't watch the whole draft. I might watch, like, the first round and then just kind of keep updated throughout the weekend, but hey, since there's no sports on, I might as well just watch the whole draft.
Yeah. So let's just, before we get into your expectations or any predictions or anything that you've got for the draft, and then talk about the economics of sports and the possibility of reopening and getting crowds going and what have you, let's talk about Gronk. This move from another Patriots player looking like to the Buccaneers.
Yeah, that's right. The Patriots yesterday trading Rob Gronkowski to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers for a 4th-round draft pick. And, I mean, it came pretty shocking, but I'm also not surprised either. It's just like, you know, Rob Gronkowski and Tom Brady, they just go together. They got to be together. I think it's going to be great. That Tampa Bay Bucs team is going to be super stacked, but I'm also just kind of questioning, you know, the relationship maybe with Rob Gronkowski and the New England Patriots. You know, here's a guy who said, you know, I'm done with football. I'm retired. He retires. He joins the WWE for a little bit. And then all of a sudden, Tom Brady goes to the Bucs, and he's like, hey, I'm joining you, brother.
You know, there's nothing like a switch to the Buccaneers or to another team to get somebody to say, I want to get back in the game and have some fun playing football and get back together. It's sort of like a part of the band coming back together.
Yeah, it's like the Beatles getting back together.
I was more thinking
that would happen.
I was more thinking the Blues Brothers, which is one of the best comedies ever from the 1981 or 80. It's fantastic with John Belushi and Dan Aykroyd. Anyway, as far as this pairing now, I mean, you've got Tom Brady, you've got Ron Gronkowski going to the Buccaneers together, coming back. What do you think that does as far as the Buccaneers and their team and how they may be from a fortitude standpoint?
Well, I mean, it's Tampa Bay Bucs now. I mean, their offensively, they'll be stacked, obviously. Rob Gronkowski provides a big weapon for Tom Brady. You know, you got Mike Evans, the wide receiver there. I mean, it's going to be pretty spectacular. It's a super team in the making for the Tampa Bay Bucs, a defense that's rebuilding, a defense that's on the rise. But, it makes sense to me, and I'm happy for Rob Gronkowski. We've listened to him before, and he was kind of saying, with the New England Patriots, the culture there is very strict. You got Bill Belichick, the longtime coach, who's very strict with how he does things, and his off-season routine, everything like that. And there's a lot of pressure there. There's a lot of pressure of winning, obviously, with the New England Patriots. And so now, Rob Gronkowski, he's looking for a change. He's looking for a fresh start, which I think Tom Brady was looking for as well.
For me, I never really had an opinion about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, but now that Brady's going there, I'm not a fan. I'm just I can't like the Buccaneers at all.
Well, being a Giants fan too.
Yeah,
being
sure.
a Giants fan, it's
Fair,
tough for you.
Yeah, fair enough. Although my dad likes Tom Brady, so I think we'll see how that all pans out. But Nathan Matoush, just what else are you anticipating from finally a big sports event, probably the most watched draft we'll ever see?
Well, it's going to be a virtual draft, so it's going to be very weird.
Yeah.
First of all. Not seeing, because even drafts, there's fans in the stands. It's an exciting event, and there's not going to be really anyone. It's going to be all virtual, so that's going to be kind of weird. But it's better than nothing, and it's going to be really great. I think it's going to be a round of quarterbacks.
Any predictions for a team that might make one particular pick? Anything you're expecting?
Well, definitely. I mean, the first and second pick are a lock. You got Joe Burrow, the former Heisman winner, and with the LSU Tigers, he's going to go number 1. He's a lock with the Cincinnati Bengals. He's going to be their future quarterback. Going number 2 is going to be Chase Young, who's a great defensive pass rusher from the Ohio State Buckeyes. He's going to go to the Redskins. Great defensive presence. But really, I think outside of the top 3 picks, or top 5 picks maybe, I'd say, it's really up for grabs. A lot of these quarterbacks, Jordan Love, Justin Herbert, Tua Tagovailoa with the Alabama Crimson Tide, they really could jump around to any team, Chargers, Dolphins. But I'm really excited about the draft. I think it could go anywhere. We could see these guys get picked by any team.
Nathan Matoush Magic, producer here on the show, joining us, talking a little bit about sports, and in just a moment we'll get over to the topic that I think really ties in with the theme of economics that we often hit on here on the show. But I think from a social and societal standpoint, it's good to have something like this draft because people have been needing something to distract them. And you can't just binge watch the same Netflix show for more than a few days or, more than a few weeks.
Right. I think a lot of people are maybe getting tired of Netflix. Maybe it's time to switch to sports.
Yeah. So, Nathan, when we look at the return of sports potentially, WWE is already back. That's happening. We're seeing talk still about the Major League Baseball coming back, and who knows what else. Maybe we'll see the return of NASCAR, because that seems like you could maintain social distancing more so with NASCAR. It's a critical thing sports is to American society, to the American economy. What are you thinking, based on what you're reading and hearing, may happen as far as sports that will return in the coming, let's say, the next 2-3 months?
Well, the next 2-3 months, it's really hard to say. With the NBA and the NHL, their seasons were pretty much at the playoff level already. They were going to start the playoffs literally a month later when everything shut down. So it's hard to say about those two leagues. There's been talks that there might be cities that host playoffs without fans. For the NHL, I think for the NHL, they were in talks with North Dakota. Some stadium in North Dakota hosting just the playoffs with no fans. So they're talking about that. The NBA, they've had similar things. I'm thinking they might just cancel the season. It's really hard to say at this point, because if you cancel the season, if you have a season, the next season's going to start in like a month anyway. So why not just cancel it? But at the same time, you don't want to throw this season to a waste. You want to have an NBA champion, a Stanley Cup champion.
If it's too difficult to facilitate it, they might just have to say, no more season right now for the NBA. But here's the biggest question, I think. Obviously, the sports will take time for the fans to return to the stands, like legally. They're probably not going to be able to say, okay, you can start showing up to baseball games or football games for a little while. But once we do get the go-ahead, yes, you can go. Maybe there are social distancing practices at that time, maybe not. How quickly do you think Americans might step up, start going to games again?
It all depends, I think, on the vaccines. You know, how many vaccines can we have? Can the health experts, you know, come up with? I think it all depends on that. It's really hard to say if they're going to have enough vaccines to have full stands available. I think it's going to be a gradual process. But to say that by, you know, August or September there's going to be stands filled with full fans, I mean, I find that hard to believe. I don't think they're going to have the vaccines. I do think the NFL is going to have a full season, but they're definitely not going to start out with, you know, sold out fans in the seat, which is going to really break my heart.
Well, one thing in my mind is, and this goes to the point I make in terms of reopening, Nathan, which is that we can have a reopening of the economy in certain states, especially. I mean, maybe more broadly than that, more quickly. I think certainly here in Colorado we can start with the reopening and elsewhere. But I think that the American people will take time before they feel comfortable going out. And that's a point in favor of reopening, because it's like you can trust Americans to go out and do the things they need to do while not taking excessive risk. Maybe not everybody. There will be some bozos that will say, you know, I'm just going to go do everything like normal. But I think that the idea that you will have fans in the stands filling up those stadiums, filling up arenas, is just not going to happen for a while.
Yeah,
and that's a tribute to the caution of Americans, the concern, and also a point in favor of saying, yeah, we can reopen, because Americans will not take an excessive risk in that regard.
Well, yeah, there might be a few. There might be a few, you know, diehard NFL fans that are like, I'm not missing my team. You know, I'm gonna go to the stands. But at the same time, I mean, you gotta respect the safety of everyone, and I'm just not sure if they'll be able to have full stands coming up in the recent months.
Now, it's a crucial part of the economy, sports. And so the idea of at least getting games onto television, though, that seems to be a good thing. That if you can have games, if you can have NASCAR races, these different events that are happening, that will be good for the American psyche and the American economy. And Nathan Matoush, there was also a documentary that just came out from ESPN that really was highly watched. I saw on Twitter over the weekend. It was former Chicago resident was trending because I guess Barack Obama was in there. A former Arkansas governor was trending because Bill Clinton was in there, and those were the titles that they each were given. I saw a picture that went up of somebody put out a picture of those two, Bill Clinton and Barack Obama, as well as George W. Bush, and they said, I know this guy because he's a former Chicago resident. I know this guy because he's a former Arkansas governor. But this third guy hasn't been on ESPN yet, so I don't know who he is. Tell us about this documentary about Michael Jordan, The Last Dance.
Well, it's a great documentary. I watched the first two episodes of 10.
So it's a series.
It's a series. Okay. Yeah, there's going to be episodes 3 and 4 come out on Sunday. But it really put in perspective, you know, how great of a team that was. The 1998 Chicago Bulls, they were going for their 6th NBA title, their 3rd in a row. And, you know, Michael Jordan, watching him play back then must have been a treat. You know, I didn't grow up in the era of Michael Jordan, and so it was tough for me to really see how great of an impact he had.
Let me say, I didn't watch sports too much. I'm not an excessive sports watcher myself even now, but I remember one of my best friends when we lived in New Jersey at that time was a huge Michael Jordan fan. So I remember that that time period a little bit. I was about 8 in the height of the 1998 season.
And see, I was 1. I was literally 1 or 2 years old, so I don't remember watching it play. But I've heard so many things about Michael Jordan, and
Space Jam was my thing in the 90s when it comes to basketball and Michael Jordan. I mean, that was just great, and he was a lead guy there with late 90s, so after that season.
Oh, yeah, Space Jam was fantastic. There's been talks that they might do another Space Jam with LeBron James being at the helm
Don't
instead,
do that.
but
Don't do that.
I just don't think it'd be the same.
No, it wouldn't.
You know.
So any final thoughts? Go ahead.
I think it's a great documentary to watch. I think it puts in perspective that 1998 Bulls team, from all different angles, from the players, and really an angle that they talk about a lot is from the GM perspective with Jerry Krause and how his ego got in the way of the team. And I think it really puts things in perspective. But, Michael Jordan, a guy who got cut from his high school basketball team all the way up to the top player in the NBA, it's impressive.
Very true. Nathan Matoush, working the Matoush Magic. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Glad to be on
And
once
our
again.
go-to sports guy, although we did have a great conversation last week with Rick French, co-owner of the Daytona Tortugas. Actually, that was 2 weeks ago. And I really enjoyed that conversation, too.
That's
But
right. That was awesome.
there's no replacement for Nathan Matoush when it comes to a little sports discussion here on Jimmy at the Crossroads. All right, we need to run to a video break. When we come back, we will talk with Heidi Ganahl, board chair for the Job Creators Network, about the Paycheck Protection Program, how things are lining up in that regard. We just are seeing additional funding going to the program from Congress, it looks like. How are small businesses doing, and what about the accountability, making sure that those loans are going to the places that they need to, which is those companies that are small businesses. We'll be back with that and more here on Jimmy at the Crossroads. I'm Jimmy Sengenberger in partnership with the Washington Examiner. Stay tuned.
America's politics are crazy. The culture is in flux. That's why we work hard to help you keep up.
More politics, more culture, and more access.
We focus on the biggest stories of the day with some of the biggest names in politics and punditry.
Go to our website, WashingtonExaminer.com. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Census Bureau, I need to take your census.
Hi.
All right, let's get started. Can you identify yourself?
Yeah, this is me.
When is your birthday?
September 15th.
What year?
Every year.
Race?
Republican.
Is this a house, an apartment, or mobile home?
Mobile apartment.
How many people are living in your home?
2.
How many people are not living in your home?
Approximately 7.8 billion other people. Minus 2.
Please identify all that apply. Samoan, Geneva, Milano, Brussels, Neapolitan, Danish.
Thin mint.
And finally, would you like to be a donor?
Oh, sure. Tonsils, toenails, and elbows.
Safe, unsafe. Very safe, completely unsafe. Extremely insanely safe. X Games unsafe. Who's there? What do you want?
It's me, Arnold. Donald Trump, I need to ask you a favor. I need you to stop using my quotes and my movie titles in your speeches. When you talk to the public, it gives them the wrong idea that somehow I support you.
I can do whatever I want. I am, after all, Commander-in-Chief.
Ah, that's what I mean right there. You can't just blatantly rip people off. That is a movie that I was in, not you, me.
I can do as I wish, as I totally recall.
See what I mean? That was a great movie I did with Jamie Lee Curtis and James Cameron, and neither one of those two support you, and now you're using that. You can't keep on doing this.
That's
it's exactly
really a true lie right there.
That's what I mean. You can't say that.
I don't know. Whatever became of us, Arnold? We used to be like brothers, like twins.
That's the last straw. I can't take it anymore. There's something wrong with you. You must have something in your brain.
It's not a tumor.
Ah, that's it. That's it. That's from Kindergarten Cop. You can't steal that.
You know what? You're fired.
You can't fire me. I don't work for you anymore. I quit.
I want you to get Pence on the line right away, Mike Pence. We're gonna send him down to Mar-a-Lago, and we're gonna put a stop to this Arnold business. Tell him to run, go, get to the chopper.
I heard that. Knock it off now, or I'll be back. Unlike you in 2020, I'll be back.
Get him out.
And now, folks, for the final segment of Jimmy at the Crossroads, let's welcome back your host, Jimmy Sengenberger.
Welcome back indeed to Jimmy at the Crossroads. I'm Jimmy Sengenberger, your host for the show. In partnership with the Washington Examiner, bringing you engaging, intelligent talk, Sang style. By the way, I can't believe I neglected to mention this earlier in the show, but tomorrow I'm looking forward to having a live conversation. It'll have to be over the phone, but with Fahad Nazair, who is the spokesperson for the Embassy of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia out of D.C. That should be a really interesting conversation. And then this coming Friday will be our first Free to Choose Friday here on Jimmy at the Crossroads. And we're going to talk about the free market and the environment. And one of our guests will be the administrator of the Environmental Protection Agency, Andrew Wheeler. Very much looking forward to what we've got coming up in the next couple of days. Don't miss a minute. Be sure to subscribe today on YouTube if you haven't done so already. YouTube.com/Jimmy at the Crossroads. All right, so we've spent a lot of time talking about the economic side of the coronavirus crisis and what we've seen, government policies in the aftermath of this pandemic starting to really spread. We've got shutdowns across the country and small business owners that have been deeply, deeply struggling to get by here, particularly because they're not able. Many are not able to do business because they've been told you can't do it. So the federal government has been trying to provide some support. We've seen stimulus programs of various sorts that have been put into effect, including the Paycheck Protection Program, which was providing loans that could be forgiven, depending on the use of the loan money, for example, for payroll, to small businesses, although we have seen a lot of larger companies that have also been beneficiaries of this PPP. So, what about the Paycheck Protection Program? How has it worked out? How are small businesses doing? What are we to make of it all? Let's talk with our friends at Job Creators Network. This time, Board Chair Heidi Ganahl joins us here on Jimmy at the Crossroads to dive in a little bit. Heidi, welcome to Jimmy at the Crossroads. So great to have you.
Hi, Jimmy. It's great to be on.
Thanks for coming on. I really appreciate it. So, when it comes to small businesses, I mean, we're going through a very difficult time for small businesses. Job Creators Network has a network of small business members across the country. What are you hearing from small businesses about the struggles, trials, and tribulations they're going through?
Well, it's an incredibly challenging time, as we all know. I think the biggest issue is how do we keep employees on staff without revenue or very little revenue? How do we pay the rent? How do we pay utilities? The expenses, on the expense side, it's very overwhelming, and they're not getting a lot of relief from landlords, unfortunately, or, utility companies, or, trying to keep employees engaged and working or paid during this time is really the key motive behind most of the entrepreneurs that I'm talking to right now. So caring for our employees, making sure that they're still getting a paycheck, and keeping the business going and alive while we're facing this very tenuous situation.
Now, you have been recognized for building a multi-million-dollar company, Can't Bow Wow. So you have a heck of a lot of experience with entrepreneurship, growing a small business into a company that has different franchise locations across the state and around and just all over the place. What from that experience, and then, of course, talking with other entrepreneurs around the country, do you think really helps you to understand what it's like to go through these very challenging times? Because I'm hearing, and we'll play a clip in a bit, but I'm hearing a lot of people on the media who seem to be dismissive of small business owners, saying, oh, they're not struggling economically. They're small business owners, therefore they can get by here. But you know from experience that there are deep, deep challenges, especially in a crisis like this, but even in general already, that small business owners face.
I mean, honestly, Jimmy, you and I both know that small businesses are the engine of this economy, and we are the job creators. We're the ones providing a livelihood for most Americans. And so it's imperative that we pay attention and honor the role that job creators play in our society. I just saw a frightening statistic this morning that, let's see, I don't want to mess this up. Moody's Analytics estimates that in only a few weeks' time, stay-at-home orders have reduced U.S. economic output by 29%. That's almost 30% of our economic output is come to a screeching halt. The median small business holding is 27 days worth of cash reserve. So we're already in this, 5 or 6 weeks? So the cash is gone. The PPP program is helpful, but more loans is not the answer. We've got to figure out a way to reopen our economy and support these small businesses in providing their products and services so that they can keep people employed.
Yeah, I think that's true. I want to play a clip here. This is a snippet from a guy named David Zirin. On MSNBC, he's a sports editor for The Nation and a sports podcast host for that. Who knew that The Nation, left-wing outlet, had a sports podcast, but apparently they do. I think he should stick to sports, but I want to play a clip particularly focusing on the way in which he talks about small business owners here. This is from, I think, Sunday.
They've gone from all lives matter to no lives matter. These folks are, let's be honest about what they are. They are the Fox News, Nazi Confederate, death cult rump of the Republican Party. And their very existence is a slap in the face, not only to the healthcare workers on the front lines, risking their lives every single day, but it's also a slap into the face to the people who are actually dying from this virus in disproportionate numbers, black and brown people. These aren't economically disenfranchised folks. These are small business owners. These are retirees. These are people who want their workers to be sent back to work, not themselves. It's a complete and utter farce. It's an AstroTurf farce.
You are welcome, Heidi Ganahl, to talk about Fox News, Nazi Confederate, death cult if you want to, but it was the last part about small businesses that I think I particularly want your thoughts on.
Oh my goodness, that's frightening. What I know about small business owners are they care deeply about their employees.
Yes.
They're like family. And as I built Camp Bow Wow and now as I'm building She Factor, I mean, my team it means the world to me. I would never put them in danger. And I want the best for them. And what I'm hearing on the front lines is people want to get back to work. They want to figure out how to navigate honoring the health and safety of their employees and their customers, but also provide their products and services so that they can keep the economy going, keep people employed, and keep food on the table for their employees as well.
But he says these aren't economically disadvantaged folks. These are small business owners. And I'm thinking, okay, I mean, this company is a new company for me as well. So I'm a small business owner. And I'm looking at it. I've got investors in my company. I need to make sure I have a return on investment. Every company that starts and utilizes, puts to use investor capital, those investors are taking a chance on that new small business and expecting a return on that investment, let alone all the other aspects to being able to provide for your employees, to make payroll, to go ahead and provide for your own family and to keep your business alive. It just, I think, shows an absolute level of ignorance that is truly dismaying if you think about it.
I absolutely agree, Jimmy. And like I said before, I think that small businesses are the engine of the economy. And if we don't keep small business owners supported and help them keep people employed, the government only has so much money. And I think we've already run out, honestly, a long time ago. But we've got to figure out how to navigate this without destroying our economy and destroying the livelihood of small businesses, because that destroys the livelihood of their employees. And it just goes downstream.
Right. Again, we're talking with Heidi Ganahl, who is board chair for the Job Creators Network. Let's specifically talk about the Paycheck Protection Program, which looks like it may get an infusion. It passed the House, or rather the Senate on Tuesday, and expected to happen tomorrow would be the passage by the House of Representatives of $484 billion in additional funding. That's $500 billion on top of what was already given out. How crucial do you think, at least given the shutdowns that are in place, this Paycheck Protection Program is? And then what also do you make of the fact that a lot of the money, billions of dollars it looks like, has been given out to larger companies and not just small businesses?
Well, I think the PPP program is a great idea. It's desperately needed, especially because of the grant component, because the last thing we want is for small business owners who are already stretched extremely thin to come out of this with a bunch more debt and the responsibility to pay a lot of money back after they get through this. I just don't think that's going to be helpful. I tell people, vote with your dollar. And if companies that are taking the money shouldn't be, then I think you're seeing what happened with Steak and Shake. and some other companies, it'll catch up with them. So I think this needs to get into the hands of the most critical folks on the front lines. Employers that have a few employees, maybe upwards of, I think it's 500 employees, is what this is targeted for. I did see some stats yesterday that 74% of the PPP loans are for $150,000 or less. So the majority of the money is getting in the hands of small business owners, and I mean small, not the big corporations. And again, I think that consumers will be the judges about who took the money that shouldn't have taken the money, and companies need to be careful about doing that if they are taking it and they don't need it.
Again, Heidi Ganahl, our guest, I think that's true. Every one of us needs to make sure that we hold accountable companies that are getting this money that should not be, but also those who are executing the program, carrying it out. One of the challenges when you've got hundreds upon hundreds of billions of dollars that you are doling out in loans or whatever else, subsidies, what have you, depending on the nature of the program, is that you can have waste, you can have abuse that's going, especially when you're trying to roll something out very, very quickly. And the Small Business Administration is doing their level best to really roll this program out in partnership with banks and so forth. And so the challenges of running a big government leviathan in the midst of a crisis are especially acute when we already know that any government program can be very difficult to facilitate. But there are a lot of folks who are saying, hey, there are programs like this that may be necessary, but, and you mentioned this before, Heidi Ganahl, the idea that we can just expect the government to provide for small businesses as well as individuals for weeks or months on end is just not tenable. So this is good as a backstop in the short term, but at some point soon, things have got to start opening up more.
Yeah, and I think it comes down to incentives. I think the government can play a role in creating powerful incentives to make it easy for people who have been infected or are at risk to stay home, protect themselves, and allow employers to support them in doing so. So I think there's been some very innovative discussion around how to tackle this. Kristi Noem and Greg Abbott and some other governors have come up with some great ideas on how to navigate their way forward with honoring the economy, the economic situation we're in as well as the healthcare situation. I mean, this is unprecedented. So we've got to work through this together. And I don't think it's a black or white issue, an either or issue. It's a both and either or. We're all in this together, and we've got to figure out how to address both the economy and our health.
What do you say to those Americans? And I'm so glad you put out the fact or the stat that you saw about 74% of the Paycheck Protection Program loans, Heidi, are going to the genuinely small businesses that need them. But there are a lot of Americans who may look at this program and say, hey, this is a profligate opportunity for a lot of bigger businesses, and I don't like this structure, and maybe they're from the left, maybe they're from the right, they're more averse to this program, maybe even pushing back and telling politicians, hey, you shouldn't pass this in the House of Representatives. What do you say to them?
I would say vote with your dollar, hold those companies accountable and, make this a PR play instead of a denial of more money or funding for the people who really need it. Not a large percentage of small businesses are getting this PPP money. So it's a very small percent of companies that have this opportunity. And I think that there are lots of other ways we can help small businesses going forward, mostly by investing in them. Buy takeout and delivery from your local restaurants, buy a gift card from a company that is struggling. I think, if landlords and mortgage owners can help on the rent relief, that would be, wonderful. But I know they have bills to pay too. So again, I think we're all in this together, and we've got to be really out of the box as far as our thinking and how to tackle some of these problems. But that's the beauty of entrepreneurship and small business owners, is that's why they're in business. They're big thinkers, they're innovators. They know how to address difficulties in their business and with their customers and their employees. So let's continue to look at getting rid of unnecessary regulation and opening the floodgates to innovation and new ways of thinking about doing business and protecting our employees and our customers. And a lot of trial and error and taking some risks, but I think it's warranted right now.
One of the great lessons, at least, that we can take away from this, and politicians around the country have been learning this lesson, at least in the middle of a crisis, whether they agree with it being permanent or not, maybe a different story, but the idea of cutting the red tape, getting out of the way of the private sector so they can innovate, so they can address these issues, so they're not burdened by unnecessary costs from unnecessary burdensome regulation. I think that dovetails very specifically and nicely with what you were just saying. Heidi Ganahl, again, board chair at Job Creators Network. Just a few more minutes with you, and I want to put on two other hats that you've got for just a moment, if I can, because first of all, you mentioned She Factor, which is a new small business that you launched, I think last year. I would love for you to tell us a little bit about that and what the dynamic is like at this point in time for you and your new business.
Well, it's interesting. We started as a digital and live platform for young women that are just launching their lives after college. And it's really to help them get out there and create a life that they love and find their passion and their sweet spot and surround themselves with great people to help them do so. We launched last May. We've reached almost 1 million young women over the last year. But we had just launched a live event series that we were going to be hosting over the next 6 months right before this all happened. So we had to quickly pivot with our small team to doing everything virtually. And we've had a lot of success. We have a huge party tonight online, our virtual squad meeting for the month. And we're going to host a virtual graduation party for 2020 graduates, young women that are just graduating from college. We're hoping to have 10,000 young women from around the country on that virtual event on May 28th. So a lot of shifting, a lot of innovating, a lot of finding resourcefulness and really staying disciplined around who our customers are and how we can best serve them.
So look, 2008, I entered college at Regis University, and you remember what was going on in 2008. When I graduated in 2011, I was lucky to find a job shortly out of college, but I was wondering, how the heck am I going to find work? Well, now you have graduates who are literally graduating into an economy where, as you said, 29% of the economy is essentially shut down, at least at this point in time. What advice are you giving to young women who are just graduating college and going out into the working world, A, how to deal with and manage through right now in the very short term, and then B, once things do get opened up again, how to go about finding that job and getting your footing post-college?
Well, I think we have two different choices right now. We can kind of live in the pessimism and the fear and the anxiety about what's happening, or we can look at the opportunity and find ways to identify our talents and our resourcefulness and offer that as a value proposition to entrepreneurs and small business owners and large corporations. Figure out, what's your sweet spot? What are you really talented at? And get out there and network online and ask for connections and make sure that you're, still using this time, if you can't find a job yet, to connect, meet people virtually. I mean, you may just be able to get the CEO of the company that you want to work for online for 10 minutes to talk about your future and start building those connections and relationships. So it's all about connections right now and cultivating relationships, and you've got to stay the course and you'll be okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my experience professionally has been one of, it is in who you know and how you cultivate those relationships, and it's certainly different when you have to be socially distanced in forming those relationships from being able to have a face-to-face meeting. And finally, Heidi Ganahl, our guest, again, board chair at Job Creators Network, founder of She Factor, and also you are a member of the Board of Regents for the University of Colorado system. In fact, you are one of two at-large posts of the Board of Regents in Colorado is elected. How is the University of Colorado weathering this storm? Because there's a lot of things that have been changing as a result of coronavirus now. And then you're also surely looking at what is life going to be like for students once we get to the fall. Will students be returning in the class, looking at online prospects, those kinds of things? Just walk us through a little bit what a major university is going through right now.
Oh my goodness, it's a grand experiment. I think we were already on track to completely turn higher ed on its head and innovate and find new ways to work with students and create the workforce of the future. Well, that's been accelerated tremendously. I mean, to the point where we are meeting constantly. We're talking about how to solve the students' problems, how to solve the faculty's problems, how to solve the problem of funding, because the state government budgets are getting drastically slashed. And of course, we're worried about admissions next fall and if students are going to be willing to sign on, not knowing if it's going to be virtual or live. At University of Colorado, we have already taken about a $350 million hit on our budget with refunds and all the things that are going on there. If we don't come back in the fall, it could be upwards of $850 million. So I think ingenuity, entrepreneurship, resourcefulness, and discipline, the engines of American success, will be just as important in higher education and figuring out how to navigate this time and educate our students and provide value in ways that we've never thought of before. But my goodness, we have some of the most amazing, talented researchers and faculty members at the University of Colorado. I mean, they have solutions. We just need to open the floodgates and let them try things, take risks, and do things differently than the traditional way we've educated in the past.
Innovation really is the key in addressing all sorts of crisis situations, no matter what kind of institution you are, to be sure. Heidi Ganahl, I know that I kept you on longer, but thank you so much for joining us and sharing your thoughts in all these hats that you wear. I appreciate it very much, and I hope you and your family stay well and healthy.
Thanks, Jimmy.
Once again, Heidi Ganahl joining us here on Jimmy at the Crossroads, board chair for the Job Creators Network, founder of SheFactor, and a University of Colorado regent at large. I want to do one other thing before we close. This is cut 6. Stacey Abrams was the Democratic candidate for governor in the last election cycle. And Abrams is now blatantly just playing, and has been for months, blatantly been playing to any number of presidential candidates since last year, but now Joe Biden, to be the vice presidential nominee. Well, this clip is not about that. This clip is where she talked a little bit about the reopening of the economy and not reopening. Take a listen to this on MSNBC yesterday.
As a small business owner myself, I understand the instinct not only to preserve your family's economy, but to protect those who work for you. And the responsibility of a business owner is to first protect your workers. That cannot happen when you have a nail salon where there's no possible way for that technician to be distant from their customer. When you are running a restaurant that requires face-to-face service. The reality is every small business owner should be able to look to the federal government for the Paycheck Protection Act. And instead of these large corporations receiving millions of dollars, those dollars need to be directed to those small businesses. We should not be putting people's lives at risk because of the antiquated systems of financial delivery that we're facing. That's one of the reasons Project 100 is so important to me, because it's about delivering cash payments to those workers who are on the front lines, who still, even though being employed, still receive SNAP benefits because they're not making enough to make ends meet. This project is designed to provide that direct cash assistance, and that's what the federal government should be doing through the next COVID package, and that should be the solution, not putting people's lives at risk so that folks can keep their job.
In other words, what Stacey Abrams is saying is the solution needs to be government handouts and government support for weeks and months on end. Now, as we were talking about with Heidi Ganahl, again, board chair at Job Creators Network, the idea that these companies, small businesses, should just be able to look to the federal government for support through the Paycheck Protection Program into perpetuity, and that the federal government should also be consistently providing cash payments to people to help us get through this. That's not a solution. That is a Band-Aid that is actually hiding a gushing wound underneath, like a really good bandage, let's say. Just put a bandage on it and hide the wound. Here's the problem. When you unleash that bandage, you take off the bandage, and suddenly the blood just starts gushing out because the economy has been suffering underneath and you've been just trying to keep it at bay. And then suddenly you allow it to gush out because, well, finally you're reopening the economy and you've had it shut down for months. You are going to see a massive recession at a minimum, if not a second Great Depression, which we need to avoid. So this is not a solution, as Stacey Abrams is putting it, having small businesses just look to the government to provide endless money somehow from thin air. I mean, Nathan Matoush works the Matoush Magic here as producer extraordinaire. I don't think even he is a magician who's capable of just getting the money flowing to these small businesses ad nauseum. And same thing with the people who she wants to just get cash payments, which is you and me. We cannot just and should not just expect that the government is going to be there for weeks or months on end and that is a solution. Now, I understand her point about nail techs or a hairstylist and how you can't really be socially distanced with those kinds of jobs. That's true in terms of having to get, I mean, if you're doing somebody's nails, there's no way to not touch that person. But if you can yourself make sure that you are perhaps wearing gloves, that plastic gloves, maybe that's possible to do. If you are making sure that you're washing your hands regularly, that you are wearing a face mask, that you require that customers come in with a face mask on in some way. I mean, it's tricky perhaps to wear a face mask when you're getting your hair cut, but there are ways that I think these companies can be innovative and creative in getting things going so that they can at least serve customers to the greatest extent possible. Surely there are ways to work on this and to be smart about it and also to trust the people. Trust that these businesses are not going to want to just put their workers in harm's way because they really do have relationships with their workers. They really do not want their workers to pass on diseases to their customers. They don't want customers to infect their staff and then the staff spread it to all their staff and then they have to shut down again and the word is out that infections happened at this Sport Clips location, just as one random example, and therefore you shouldn't go there anymore. They don't want that kind of reputation. So businesses will take precautions. They will figure out how to do it successfully. We've been talking about innovation all day. We were talking about it with Howard Husock from the Washington Examiner. Well, he wrote a column for the Washington Examiner. He's with the Manhattan Institute. We were talking about innovation with him. We were talking about private sector innovation with Heidi Ganahl. That's what this is about, is being innovative and creative and finding solutions. And if anybody can do it, it's the private sector because they have motivation to do it. Look, Adam Smith talked about how it is not from the benevolence of the butcher that we get our dinner, but how it is how he's working towards his self-interest. Not a literal word for word quote, but I'm paraphrasing here. It is about the invisible hand. Somebody is working to make a buck. They want to make a profit. Therefore, they're going to provide a good quality service or product to customers. And they don't want those customers to get sick and not want to come back or be scared about going to your place of business. So they're going to be smart about it and be innovative and creative, especially when it's really ingrained in people that you need to take these kinds of precautions. We cannot just keep looking to the government like Stacey Abrams and Joe Biden, Zeke Emanuel, and Philip Rucker, and Don Lemon, and David Zirin, and all the rest want us to do. And the reason, again, why they want us to do that is because they believe that the government can and should provide. And that is a difference of an understanding of human nature and the role of government more than anything else. We can get through this, we will get through this, and it doesn't mean that we have to or should keep things shut down. Let's trust the people. Let's trust the creativity and ingenuity of the people. Unleash the unlimited potential of each and every individual. I'm Jimmy Sengenberger. That is it for us today. Again, tomorrow, Fahad Nazair, who is spokesperson for the Saudi Embassy in D.C., will join us. Also, we'll be joined on Friday for our first Free to Choose Friday, focusing on the free market and the environment by Environmental Protection Administration Administrator, so EPA Administrator Andrew Wheeler. We've got so much coming up. Be sure to subscribe to the Jimmy at the Crossroads YouTube channel, youtube.com/Jimmy at the Crossroads, and also on Facebook, Jimmy Sengenberger, media personality. Like us there. And follow and like the Washington Examiner on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. And by the way, follow me at Sang Center, Sang with an E, not an A, Center on Twitter. Thanks so much for joining us again. Back tomorrow. Appreciate it. And as always, may God bless America.